Hello, this is the Fight Back podcast, hosted by exercise scientist Georgia Very. Here you'll find a series of honest conversations about martial arts and mental health. My guests and I explore the statement that every martial artist has heard: martial arts saved me. How and why do combat sports save people? Listen to find out. Everybody, first podcast back for 2022. I've been on a little bit of a break, which you might have noticed from the absence of episodes, but I'm very excited to be back today with Briana Bowley. Briana is a trauma coach, and she found her way there from being a mindset coach for martial artists. So I'm super excited to hear more about her story today. Briana, welcome.
Thank you so much. How cool that I'm the first one for 2022.
I know, it must be a good omen, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's expand more about that. Let's go maybe with a bit of a narrative. Where did you start and how did you get towards being a trauma coach?
Yeah, so I'll give you the condensed version because it is a long story, but I started as a personal trainer and nutritionist. So at the time I was competing as a fitness model. And in terms of clients, I was working with a lot of individuals who were looking for significant weight loss. And so through my journey in fitness modeling and kind of seeing the behind the scenes of some of, the dysfunctional way of, the fitness modeling world is, I started to notice that it didn't matter how much we physically transformed. If we mentally weren't transforming and we were, kind of stagnating, there was a massive misalignment. And so from working as a personal trainer and a nutritionist, I sort of started to self-educate and dig around in the mindset side of things, realizing that was a massive gap in the industry, and began working as, I guess you could call me a life coach. I was just sort of doing generalized work, supporting people in creating a life that felt really functional and really aligned for them. And from there, I transitioned out of fitness modeling and got into martial arts myself. So I started with Muay Thai and then found Jujutsu and then found a little bit of wrestling and actually started my own fight camp in Muay Thai. And at the same time, I was in contact with quite a well-known Australian UFC fighter. And we sort of had the conversation about whether the work that I was doing as a coach might actually support her performance in the cage. And we sort of decided, well, let's give it a go and see what happens. And as a result, her performance prior to working with me and her performance after working with me were like the transformation was undeniable. So it was really cool because I was like, I'm onto something here. Like this stuff actually creates a tangible result in terms of someone's athletic performance. So I decided to drop out of my fight camp and pursue working with extreme sports athletes. So working with, I was working with a lot of trick BMX riders and skateboarders and motocross and all sorts of sports. But my biggest love is, of course, the combat sports. And through that process, having the opportunity to work with everyone from amateurs through to world champions, UFC, Bellator, I came to realize that, a lot of people who get into extreme sports come from some sort of trauma. I don't think anyone who has had a really healthy upbringing chooses a sport where they get punched in the face or where someone's trying to, steal their limbs. So yeah, that kind of had me then transition into working specifically with trauma. I came to realize that basically my whole career had been indirectly supporting people in navigating their traumas. So yeah, that's the condensed version.
What did that look like with martial artists? Was it kind of like going in there and being like, okay, what are the three biggest things that are holding you back right now and how can we pull those apart? And then was it like that they were all kind of based in trauma, so it was trauma healing sort of work that you were doing with them, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so it looked like a mixture. I mean, I was able to draw on obviously my personal training background and my nutrition background. So the really obvious direct route performance enhancers, so breath work, nutrition, even down to things like I've got a background in physiotherapy, so some different movement practices and that sort of thing. But the stuff that really moved the needle was the stuff that was kind of playing out in the background. So I'm a big believer that everything touches in our world, you know, that the fight with our partner impacts how much money we make, and whether or not we've done our taxes for the last year impacts how we show up online. And, you know, it sounds bizarre, but I'm such a big believer everything touches. And so what I was finding with a lot of these athletes was that they were doing everything right in terms of recovery, in terms of nutrition, in terms of training. Yes, they were microscopic tweaks, but mostly it was the things that they had never really faced. And it could have been, you know, there were some women that I worked with who'd come from domestic violence. There were some women who had come from, you know, a dysfunctional upbringing. So maybe their parents were addicts. There were some people that I worked with who, you know, had a history of alcoholism themselves. And so, yeah, realizing it was those things that kind of were under the surface, that when we looked at them and when we dug through them and kind of unearthed them, were really the big needle movers in terms of how they performed.
I know that now a lot of your work looks at nervous system, how the nervous system has adapted to trauma, how we can heal the nervous system. As you were talking, I was wondering, like, well, I wonder, like, how you would explain the kind of nervous system story that would go along with that. You know, I think a lot of people probably, it resonates thinking, yeah, you know, like I put in so much work in, you know, maybe it's not as an extreme sports athlete, but maybe it's in work or in my relationships, and I'm watching all the things and I'm doing all the seminars and I'm like doing all the small things, but I know it's my underlying trauma that's holding me back. From a nervous system perspective, how do you explain that?
Yeah, so I mean, to keep it fairly basic, I kind of explain it as we operate from two different states. Excuse me, my words aren't working today. We're either operating from survival mode, which is basically, you know, our body is the underlying narrative is that we're under threat, right? So we're operating from fear, we're operating from a level of avoidance, and we're literally just trying to stay alive. And so our body's ability to perform well is severely diminished because we're essentially doing the bare minimal just to survive another day, versus the other state, which is thriving. And that's when, you know, our brain's executive center, or the part of the brain that basically separates us from animals, the part of the brain that's able to think about what we're thinking about, is switched on. Our digestive system, our organs are all working optimally. You know, we're able to rest and recover well, because, you know, our body's going into a rest state. And even if, you know, we dig down even deeper, there's a saying that, you know, children learn best when they're playing, you know, when they're having fun. And so it's that same kind of analogy. When we're able to tap into thriving and we're able to play and have fun, we tend to thrive and we tend to perform a whole lot better. Whereas if we're operating from that survival state, we're actually unable to access the play state. The body is, our ability to move into having fun and being relaxed and finding a flow state is actually, we just can't access it.
Why do you think people who are more frequently in that survival state, I wouldn't say it's, you know, 100% of the time, but certainly if you've experienced a lot of trauma, and like we just said, people who go into combat sports who want to get punched in the face tend to have something in their background. Why do you think it is that someone in a survival state would want to go into more states that are going to push them into higher and higher need to survival state, right? Like when you're sparring or rolling or competing with someone, it feels to your nervous system and to your body the same as a life or death kind of situation.
Yeah, there's a few ways I could answer this. The first being that it feels familiar. Mm-hmm. So this is going to sound a little bit backwards, but whatever is familiar actually starts to become safe. So it feels safe for us. It's familiar. It's certain. We kind of know what to expect. So if we've been brought up in a environment where being unsafe or you know, being brought up having experienced some sort of trauma is familiar to us. So even though it's uncomfortable, it's actually what feels the most comfortable to the nervous system. So in a lot of ways, people who've come from some sort of trauma go into martial arts because that level of discomfort is actually the thing that feels most comfortable. For other people, I believe that it's a way of, for me, I believe this was the case. It's a way of expanding our window of tolerance. So I know you speak about this. I think I saw a post earlier today. Our window of tolerance is basically our emotional capacity, our ability to be with different ends of emotions that come up as a result of experiences without it dysregulating us. So without it throwing us into being overreactive or going into shutdown. So yeah, for me, I think it was actually my way of expanding upon my window of tolerance, putting myself in situations where I knew I was safe. I knew that I wasn't, I wasn't going to go into a gym and have someone, completely beat the shit out of me. I knew that it was within a controlled environment. So there was enough safety there, but also it was uncomfortable enough that it was still stretching me. And then I also think there's a lot of other elements involved in terms of, I think a lot of people who've been through trauma have a lot of suppressed anger, frustration, bitterness, resentment. And so a martial arts environment is actually, again, it's a safe space to express those emotions that society deem inappropriate. It's not accepted within society to go out and, primal scream, or to go out and kick a tree, or lay into the ground or something in public. Whereas a martial arts gym, it's acceptable. It's basically an outlet for us to feel through and draw to conclusion a lot of those unfelt feelings.
Yeah, I think it's just incredible that people intuitively will feel like where the edge of their window of tolerance is and get to that point where they're like, oh, I think I do want to start expanding upon myself. And that looks different for different people. Some people will say to me, like, I really want to be in the class because I know I feel uncomfortable working in groups of people. So I want to stretch myself in that way. Or, it could look different for everybody. And same with the outlet, like there's this intuitive thing that's going like, something's not right. Like you might not even have cognitive awareness of the memories of the trauma. You might not even be aware that that's what's happened, but you're like, no, I know I need to physically express myself in some way. And then that martial arts is just there. Like it's incredible that we have that. And I really do hope that in the future that'll start to become more supported by funding, accessible to people who don't have the budget for the forever raising, I think, costs of martial arts as the UFC becomes more popular, and that it will become like a more accepted trauma therapy. It's accepted if it's like, oh, I'm going because I want to learn self-defense, or get fitter, or have fun, or I just want to learn a sport, or even like I want to go and hit things. Like that would be socially acceptable. If someone was like, I'm going to heal my trauma, people would be like, No. We don't talk about that. That's like the hush thing. Like, please don't mention that you're doing anything like that. I think that's probably the next step. I really hope so anyway.
Yeah, it's amazing how often I hear women in particular, because I think for women, we've sort of had, we're the physically weaker sex, if you want to go by that narrative. And so I think it is really common for women to turn to particularly Muay Thai. That's been my experience, because that's that space for them to, unleash on a boxing bag, or, hit the pads. And I hear it at least once a week. One of my clients say like, oh, I just want to go hit something. Like, I just want to, go lay into a boxing bag. So it's like you said, it's that intuitive outlet. It's really cool.
It is really, really cool. And it is, like you say, it's a space for women to be allowed to show those kind of emotions that we are socialized to believe are masculine emotions, like anger and frustration and rage and all of these kind of things that are emotions, but somehow missed getting labeled as emotions, right? Like, if generally speaking, society will say that, those kind of things are just things that guys do, but they're not being emotional. But women are kind of allowed to be emotional, but, you know, in private where people don't see them, we don't want to see you be emotional. We don't want to deal with you being emotional, but also anger is not part of that emotional toolkit. It's just really cool that it pulls down all of those barriers kind of at once.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful outlet for women to be a little bit messy. I think there's a lot of pressure on women to, you know, to always look put together and to, you know, have the hair and the makeup perfect. And one of the things that I personally love the most, especially Jiu-Jitsu, is that, like, you know, you tie your hair back and it doesn't matter how perfectly you tie your hair back, it's coming out a mess after a roll. So yeah, it's a space where it's perfectly acceptable to have your hair, you know, to be the wild woman, to have your hair a mess, to have, you know, like a bright red face and sweat. And yeah, it's a permission slip in so many ways.
100%. Coming from the person who is always the reddest in the room, I just have like that red undertone where I'll have like one roll and everyone will be like, "Are you okay?" And I'll be like, "No, I'm fit. I'm fine. This is just how my face looks."
I got home the other day after jiu-jitsu and my housemate was like, "You're really sunburnt." I'm like, "No, that's just jiu-jitsu."
Yeah, that's just my face. We've talked about quite a lot of the themes that generally tend to come up on this show, at least, and in some of the research that I've conducted. But one question that I really love to ask everyone is, and for you, I'll ask you in two lenses, for yourself and also generally for the community at large. Why do you think that people will say, like, martial arts saved me? You know, Jiu-Jitsu saved my life, MMA saved my life is a really recurrent theme that you hear coming up a lot. What do you think it is about combat sports that have such a profound effect that they cause people to say something, you know, quite so profound?
Yeah, I think again, it's that outlet. I really believe that, you know, a lot of the work that I do centers around something called somatic release. And somatic release is basically utilizing movement practices, utilizing sound, you know, just utilizing a variety of different tools to release whatever's stored within the body. So you know, I always say the body remembers what the mind forgets. And so even traumas that we're not necessarily conscious of are basically stored in the cells. There's cellular memory of whatever it was that happened. And so if those emotions aren't drawn to completion and discharged, they lie kind of stagnant in the cells in the body. And so, you know, the aim of somatic release work is basically to uproot whatever's there. And it doesn't have to be something that we're necessarily conscious of. It doesn't have to be something where, you know, we're able to go, "Oh, right now I'm releasing anger linked to when XYZ happened." It can literally be something of, I have no idea what's happening right now, but all of a sudden I have all this energy coming up and I feel like vomiting. You know, it could be something like that. And so, yeah, I think that martial arts provides that outlet to somatically release, without knowing that that's what we're doing, somatically release, you know, that stored trauma or that stored anger or resentment or sadness or grief or whatever it may be. So, you know, I hear stories all the time, as you said, of people who've come from maybe gang affiliation and violence, and often those narratives stem from a need for significance and a need to feel power. And moving into martial arts, that gives them another outlet to feel significant and to feel that sense of power, but releasing it in a healthy way. So yeah, and I guess for me it was much the same, really, that I had a lot of my story stems around feeling like I didn't have a voice, feeling like I was seen but not heard, and that it was, you know, it was sort of like, I guess when I tune into the energy of my childhood, it's very much like the kid that we just put in the corner, and she just, you know, don't make too much noise, don't, you know, be there, but don't really be there. We don't want to notice you. And so martial arts for me was the place where I could reconnect with that power and reconnect with the fact that there's a power within me. There's this potential and this ability within me that gets to be expressed, and to move a lot of that suppressed energy through my body.
100%. I think we hear a lot about how changes in our mindset and in our opinion of ourselves need to be experiential. You know, you can't just have this like whole narrative and then discover the narrative and be like, oh, I'm going to cut that narrative off and think something else. Like the brain connections don't just unwire and rewire that quickly. And by thinking like, oh, I'm not going to think like that anymore, you tend to just be rooting it deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think for some people, it can be a little bit disheartening to think like, okay, I've uncovered what the root of my trauma is. Now I know what happened. Why am I not healed yet? And then it can be something as, you know, seemingly simple as you just need to actually release that. Like you can find out your story first, or you cannot. Like that's totally up to you and what's going to feel safe for you. But releasing it is the part that's really going to be important. And movement is just so integral in achieving that.
Yeah. And I mean, in addition to that, particularly Muay Thai, like really traditional Muay Thai, you know, they encourage making the noise as you throw a punch, as you kick, you know, and especially when you go over to Thailand and whatnot, you know, they really encourage like the ooh wee, you know, and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, for me, a big aspect of that, you know, I was often told as a kid, you know, like, be quiet. I have a naturally loud voice, so it was be quiet, like the whole world doesn't need to hear you. And so having that anchored consistently, it was like, okay, shut up, not everyone needs to hear you, don't speak, which is so funny because now my entire career centers around speaking. But you know, Muay Thai was really, not only was it an opportunity for me to be big in my movements and to release a lot of that stored energy, but it was also so strongly encouraged, like be loud. You know, when you make noise, when you kick it in, you know, they say that it helps with your breathing and that it helps increase power and all of those things. So it was really interesting for me, my first few Muay Thai sessions, watching the way it was like, I wouldn't make a noise. And they're like, come on, like make noise, like yell, whatever you've got to do. So yeah, it was kind of double whammy for me, encouraging me to use my voice and encouraging me to also be big in my movements and to be seen.
Yeah, 100%. I started in karate, and karate, a big part of that is a ki, which is a spirit shout. And that's now been researched as being linked to changing the way that women see themselves as being capable of taking up space. And I think that that's a really cool thing, right? That is one piece of undoing the social constructs of gender, right? Women make themselves smaller by, like at the start of your career, you know, losing weight as much as possible, always trying to lose weight. Men are trying to get bigger muscles. Women are trying to get smaller. And we are starting to see that change now. And that's one piece of it. But it's also the attitudes. Like if I sit on a tram, I'm going to make myself small and like cross my legs and be tiny. And if I'm a guy, I'm going to man spread, you know, and like these are big stereotypes, but they play out frequently. And same thing on the mats. Like you tend to see women will move out of the way for guys while they're sparring, and men will tend to just blindly crash into anyone who's near them. Again, these are like big brushing stereotypes, but I think through repeatedly being encouraged to use your voice, to ki or shout or to grunt, to sweat and to exist and hold your space really shows up in your life in so many ways.
Yeah. And there's that ripple effect, right? How we do anything is how we do everything. Everything touches. So when we're willing to take up space on the mats or in the ring or in the cage or whatever, that it rewires the nervous system that it's safe. It's safe to be seen. It's safe to take up space. And so, hey, presto, all of a sudden, you know, you're taking up more space in your business, or you're taking up more space, you know, financially, like you're bringing more in, you're willing to be seen.
Yes, absolutely. I always used to think that you could compartmentalize the different parts of yourself, that I was like, oh, well, I have a different voice when I'm at work, when I'm talking to my parents, when I'm talking to my friends, therefore I'm separate. I mean, that was quite a long time ago when I used to think that, because I totally agree that, you know, you can't wear various masks and expect that everything doesn't blend into each other, and that, you know, it's going to go both ways, right? Like positive impact in one space is going to positively impact all your other spaces. And similarly, having something really bad going on in one space in your life is definitely going to bleed into the other areas of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're suppressed in one area, we're suppressed in every area.
Yes. speaking to women who might be listening to this podcast who really identify with, I have a background of having experienced trauma or violence or whatever it might be, from a nervous system perspective and as a trauma coach, what advice would you give them stepping into a martial arts gym, maybe for the first time?
Firstly, I would say start to become acquainted with your unique nervous system. No two people are ever the same. The nervous system learns through experience. So start to tap into and really take note of what goes on within your body and within your mind, what thoughts pop up when you are, feeling, when you go into a sympathetic state, so a fight or flight response. Start to notice, when I'm feeling anxious or when I'm feeling angry, what do I feel within my body? What thoughts come to rise? And then start to look at when we start to go into shutdown or the dorsal response, when we start to go into freeze or when we want to make ourselves smaller, what are the feelings within the body? And what are the thoughts that pop up? And start to actually lay it out on a spreadsheet that you can visually start to see, oh, okay, this is how my nervous system responds. And then also take note of when you're feeling safe, when you're feeling secure, what do you feel in your body? Where do you feel that sense of safety in the body? What are the thoughts that come up? So that then you start to be able to notice in the moment as you become more and more aware, you start to know what's going on. You start to be able to go, okay, something's happening here where I'm going into a fight or flight response. Right? And so then with that awareness, you can then start to play around with different tools, whether that be breath work, maybe a 1-to-1 ratio breathing. So, say a 4-second inhale and a 4-second exhale. We can play around with maybe shaking it out when we feel the energy come up. We can start to, find different tools that work for us through trial and error so that then when it comes to going into an environment that may bring up either a stress response, whether that be shutdown or, the desire to kind of fight or run, we can self-regulate in those moments. And also, I would say, own it. This is the piece, right? The most beautiful thing about us as human beings is that, our nervous system is there to serve us. That desire to run or fight or completely shut down is actually there to keep us safe. And so those feelings that we feel of feeling, inadequate or insecure or overwhelmed or fearful, that's part of it. That's part of being human. And so when you actually own it, not only do you serve as a permission slip for others, but in my experience, most people are like, oh, cool. Okay. Thank you for making me aware. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable. And what do you need from me? I joined a new Jujutsu gym just start of December. And one of the first things that I said to the coach was, hey, just a heads up, I sometimes get a little bit of social anxiety when I'm in the gym. And he was like, beautiful. What do you need from me? So owning it. Recognizing that it's never something to be ashamed of, that it's actually a sign that you're perfect, whole and complete and not finished yet. Own the hell out of it. Rock it.
Yeah, so if I'm summarizing that for actionable things that people can do, the first is to do a little bit of prep. If we think about fighting as an analogy, you wouldn't get in the ring and try and do a spinning back kick for the first time in the ring, right? You would practice it many, many times beforehand, or at least a few times beforehand before you went to go and throw it in the ring. And I think it's the same thing with grounding strategies, with understanding your nervous system. So you can think, okay, if I feel anxious, and I know that for me, anxious is kind of like a whirring, sick feeling in my stomach, and then it'll become like a big knot in my throat. When I feel that, then I am going to do 5 fingers, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And okay, I know that that's my go-to. That way, in the moment when that does come up, you don't have to think, crap, what am I going to do now? You just have an automatic response, just in much the same way as if you trill that if someone punches in you in the face, you punch them back in the face. That way, then when you are owning what's happened to you and you step into the gym and you say to your coach, hey, like sometimes I go into shutdown, or, you know, I know that for me, or maybe you don't even know, maybe you're just saying, hey, I know that this feels really scary for me. I'm feeling like, you know, there might be some times where I need to step away. And they say, what do you need from me? You might even say, this is the way that I like to ground. You know, can you come and remind me to focus on my breathing, or can you come and shake off with me and we'll do that together? That way you can talk them and involve them in the process. And then you've got an action plan. So the steps would be to get to know your window of tolerance, which is essentially what you're alluding to, right? When you feel safe, when you feel shut down, and when you feel overwhelmed and stressed. Knowing what that feels like in your body, having responses that work for you and your individual nervous system, and then owning it when you get to the gym.
Yeah, you delivered that so eloquently. Thank you for summing that up. And I think as well, like, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. You know, like, even if you inform your coach or your training partner of what's going on for you and they don't respond to how can I support you or what do you need, ask for it. You know, I had an experience, again, maybe 6 weeks ago, where I went into quite an overwhelmed response drilling. And I actually just said, hey, I just need a breather for like 3 minutes. All I need from you is just for you to be okay with me just taking a pause. And they were fine with it, you know. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for what you need. Because again, there's no shame in it. There's no shame, and we don't have to hide behind this mask of perfection and having it all together.
What about for people who are training, who have maybe noticed that one of their training partners sometimes, you know, runs off the mats or is absent, or just anyone generally speaking who wants to be a little bit more trauma aware, given that we've just said that there are a high proportion of people on the mat or, you know, in the training area at any given time who have experienced trauma, that want to be a little bit more trauma aware and look after their community and their training partners better?
So tips for those circumstances?
Yes.
I would say lead the way, go first. So, share parts of what comes up for you. Again, serving as a permission slip, but also open up the conversation. You know, ask your training partners, ask your teammates if they ever do experience, any sort of kind of stress response in the club, and if so, like, how can you support them? Or if you're noticing that there are kind of responses where they run off the mats, just being really supportive and understanding, and not making them wrong for it. But rather seeking to understand, asking questions if they're comfortable with sharing. And if they're not comfortable with sharing, just let them know that, you're there for them. And if they do ever need anything from you, you'll do it to the best of your abilities, that you're a safe space for them.
Yes, I love that. I think that that's such an important thing for me. That's one of the things that came out of listening to the Trap podcast, which I recommend to everyone in the world, but especially people in Australia, which was a series from the Victorian Women's Trust about domestic violence in Australia. And they spoke about how, just saying to someone, are you safe at home? Or, if you ever need to talk about anything, that I'm here. It seems like maybe things aren't okay with your relationship, or, not saying like you need to do this, you need to do that, but just saying like, I'm here, and like, I'm maybe noticing that something isn't okay, might mean that 3 months or a year down the track that they feel safe to come to you and say, can I have help? Or maybe you just planted the seed, and then in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, then they're going to go to somebody else for help. But just being able to say like, I'm here and I want to make sure that you're safe is such a powerful and I think underrated thing that we can do.
Yeah, I think as well, to add to that, continuing to do the work on ourselves. Co-regulation tells us that our nervous systems tend to somewhat mimic those around us. And so I've definitely noticed it, that the more work I do on myself and the more I come to a place where I'm able to self-regulate, the more people tend to just naturally be drawn towards me, and they're willing to open up about what's going on for them, because we unconsciously can feel when someone's a safe space, and when someone does have or is able to self-regulate, it's kind of natural that those around us start to naturally regulate themselves as well. So yeah, honestly, the best thing that we can do for other people and helping other people heal through their traumas is to go first and to do it for ourselves, knowing that, you know, it serves as the example.
Yeah, I love co-regulation, especially in the context of martial arts, because it's pretty rare that you're doing martial arts by yourself. You know, at the very least, you're going to be working one-on-one with a trainer, and more often than not, you're in a group of people. And they can be such a powerful tool that can go both ways. You know, if the entire group is dysregulated, you can sometimes walk away from a club or a particular class being like, why do I feel hijacked? Like my energy feels so weird. Why do I feel so short and so snappy? And it's because humans are designed to live in groups, and as a community we do this cool thing called co-regulating, where our nervous system literally changes in response to the people who are near us, where our heart rates will sync to other people's heart rates, and the speed that we speak at will sync to the speed that other people are speaking at. And so it means as a group, you know, everything has like a ripple effect of, like, you know, it's not just things that touch within your life, but it's the people that you're touching as well too.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to, before I go into a gym, before I do anything really, my entire life is just one big ceremony, but I will try and actually spend a couple of moments just checking in with how I feel and grounding myself and making sure that I'm in a place of, to the best of my ability, feeling safe and secure and feeling, really present in my body, so that then when I do go in and I, you know, drill or roll with or, you know, hit pads with someone, I have quite a like grounded, playful energy, you know, and it's really cool to watch how, you know, when I start training with someone or drilling with someone, noticing how my playfulness immediately shifts their energy. So yeah. Yes, starting with yourself.
It's a very cool reminder of, there's a book called The Third Space, which is essentially about that as a concept. It's about putting a pause in between things like finishing work and then going home, or even within a work day in between meetings, or talking to one person and then talking to another person, to stop and check in and go, where am I at? What am I going to take from my previous interaction, or, you know, whenever in my life, and bring into this next interaction that I'm going to be in? And who am I going to be interacting with, and what kind of state might they be in, and how is the way that I show up going to affect them positively or negatively? And I think that doing that before stepping on the mat is probably one of the most critical times. It's good all the time, but that's definitely a critical time.
Definitely, 100%.
Is there anything else that you would like to share, having a platform for particularly women, but martial artists who are curious about trauma and understanding our nervous system? Yeah, with this platform, was there anything you would want to say?
I think I'd like to say that transformation and healing don't take time, they take courage. I think that it's having the willingness to go to a lot of the places that we don't want to go. That's what really creates the change, not only for ourselves, but for a ripple effect through our entire world, from the, you know, our family dynamics through to, you know, our martial arts dynamics, all of it, whether it's your financial situation that you want to heal, whether it's your relationship to your partner, whether it's your relationship to your kids or to your parents, or your performance and health in the gym, or in general. It's always in the places that we don't want to go where the gold is. There's a quote that I love and that I live by, which is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And so, you know, to throw a whole bunch of cliches out there, like the resistance is actually, it is the way. I always try to check in with myself, or where am I most resistant? Okay, that's where I get to go. And so again, transformation doesn't take time, it takes courage. And we equip ourselves with this toolkit to stay regulated, so that we can go to those places that maybe we don't want to go.
Briana, I know you're a trauma coach, so I'm assuming you've got programs or one-on-one opportunities for people. How can people work with you and how can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm about to relaunch my 8-week group program called Heal and Reveal. So that's basically a process of supporting individuals in mapping out their nervous system, and then from starting to regulate, opening up to what they're here for. Again, when we're operating from that survival state, we're operating from the animal brain. So we're not as connected to what our actual purpose in this lifetime is. So the aim of Heal and Reveal is to open them up to that. If they reach out to me via Instagram or Facebook, they can find me by searching Briana Bowley. So Briana Bowley. And I also have a free resource for women, which is basically, again, rewiring their nervous system, coming back from burnout and coming back from overwhelm. So that's an ebook and an audio training, which they can get at www.fiercefreewoman.com.
Perfect. We'll put all the details for those in the show notes. And then if people have questions about time zones and, online and recordings and all of those general frequently asked questions, then they can DM you on Instagram or Facebook. Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, it was really fun to get to know you live on a podcast. Well, not live, but, with an audience.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was fun. I love what you're doing. It's cool. As soon as I came across your social media, I was like, yes, I love that people are taking these two worlds and bridging them, because I think that there's so much magic available to us in trauma work, and there's so much magic available to us in martial arts, and the two together is the best.
Yes, it is. Have you thought of something to be grateful for today? What was it? I'm grateful for the amazing women that train with me at the Fight Back Project. I'm grateful for Nari and the beautiful song Shape Me, heard at the beginning and end of every episode. And I'm grateful for you, for listening to this show and helping martial arts keep saving lives. So thank you, from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to leave me a review to help more people find the show, that's a bonus.
You need to know that nobody shapes me but me. Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight above his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one to power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came, and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body, hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny for my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?